Number 8. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a tie. Yeah, that's it. Look, are you really that shocked? It's not even that they're the exact same monster or do the exact same things. They're just the same amount of fantastic for different reasons. Also, their impact is kind of the same. Nargacuga and Tigrex are the second generation flagships I'm sure a lot of us are very familiar with, considering they helmed the games in the second generation that came to the West, Freedom 2 and Freedom Unite. Freedom Unite is a fantastic game, and it got a lot of us very well acquainted with these two feline super predators. With Freedom Unite being a direct upgrade from Freedom 2, Tigrex dominating the low-rank village and Nargacuga making himself known in the high-ranking quests, the poignant similarities between the two, and the fairly limited storytelling of the Freedom series games, I kinda consider these two to be co-leads, a package deal that made the Freedom series their own. And what a pair of co-leads they were. Back in the day, Tigrex and Nargacuga were terrifying, both incredibly fast, endlessly tenacious, and throwing out massive damage for the time. Tigrex, especially, was a terrifying wall that I fought over and over and over and over until I finally was able to defeat him. Though not as tough as they used to be, the fear that Tigrex and Nargacuga did inspire in the Freedom games has created a lot of fond memories that have stuck around with probably every single hunter who was around for or has picked up a second generation game. And they're immediately memorable for their designs as well. Sleek, powerful, simple, and dangerous. Two flying wyverns reimagined as quadrupeds, their wings coming off the sides of their powerful forelimbs, and both modeled after big predatory cats, using those inspirations to communicate how they behave and hunt. There's a lot of very good reasons why Tigrex and Nargacuga have been so iconic to Monster Hunter and have maintained their relevance for so long. What Tigrex and Nargacuga did for Monster Hunter was not exactly create a trend, but wholly legitimize and cement one. The first generation of Monster Hunter clearly made do with some very limited resources. That basic wyvern skeleton is used in the vast majority of the monsters found there, with only the elder dragons and bird wyverns having much of any diversity in their skeletons. With more resources, knowledge, and understanding of what these games were, the second generation began to branch out a little more, began to experiment a bit with both new non-wyvern monster classifications as well as expanding a bit more on the monster classes that were already established. The Elder Dragons continued to be weird and wacky and all over the place with some establishment of unity. The Raptors and Birds made two pretty distinct categories of bird wyverns, and then they made a big bullfango and plopped him in the same category as a bunch of monkeys. But I think the monsters that metaphorically, and in one case very literally, were the loudest and proudest champions of this idea to experiment and alter the established monster categories were Tigrex and Nargacuga. I find the evolution of the Flying Wyvern to be fascinating, because this new subgroup helmed by Tigrex and Nargacuga isn't even an evolution of the Flying Wyvern at all. Totally different branch of the phylogeny tree, split off from a common ancestor, and I love when Monster Hunter does things like this. To me, the monsters that allow us to get into the weeds of how the nature of this world works, and open up possibilities and answer lots of new questions are just as fascinating as those monsters who border on the absurd and conjure a million questions of their own. Tigrex and Nargacuga having the prominence that they do opens the eye to the countless possibilities that the world of Monster Hunter has. I think these two are a statement that this world is filled to the absolute brim with life, in the present day and in the distant past. Yes, new monster skeletons and classifications are indeed fantastic to have. But I think monsters like Tigrex and Nargacuga, these complete reassessments of the most prominent monster category in the series, shows us that these classifications that we have are absolutely stuffed with possibilities and potential creativity. Throughout the history of this world, there could be a million different flying wyverns. Just flying wyverns. Yeah, Nargacuga and Tigrex aren't the first monsters to experiment with this idea, but they're on two game covers back to back, completely reimagining the flying wyvern for all to see. What these two monsters have to say is that things like groundedness and realism, these are not shackles and chains, these are the parameters that breed creativity. Nargacuga and Tigrex are big aspects as to why this franchise and its creature design stands so far above nearly all others in the gaming industry. And when certain monsters test the limits of these parameters and seem to barely stay within them, it's cool, because you know that there is an explanation somewhere that determines how certain monsters can brush up against what should be possible. And when a select few monsters are capable of shattering the rules and live outside of what reality can explain, it makes them all the more frightening. I love what these two have to say about Monster Hunter, how they allow it to expand and change yet stay defined. And don't think for a second that this new way of looking at the monsters of Monster Hunter was wasted on two subpar flagship monsters. Tigrex and Nargacuga have presence, fear, respect, excellent fights, stellar theme music, killer gear, and like I said earlier, they do things so differently. Yet they're the exact same amount of excellent. Tigrex is a living avalanche of unrelenting berserker power. Nargacuga is a sleek, precise, and efficient ambush predator. Tigrex armor is beefy and imposing without being ridiculous looking. Nargacuga's armor is dripping with ninja inspiration. Tigrex takes inspiration from the twin powerhouses of a tiger and a tyrannosaurus, whilst Nargacuga draws inspiration from stealthy nocturnal predators like panthers and bats. Tigrex's theme is that of an oncoming freight train that has purposefully derailed itself that it may eviscerate you in particular. As Nargacuga's fight theme depicts a chaotic dance of death in the depths of a darkened forest. Tigrex's bone-shattering roar and Nargacuga's deceptive double tail slam are iconic techniques that have sent many an unprepared hunter to the grave. Tigrex opens Freedom 2 and Freedom Unites by stalking the snowy mountains and throwing you down from them in the very early chapters of the game, while Nargacuga haunts the myths and legends of the Great Forest in Freedom Unites' later chapters. And I love all these aspects about the same across the board. Neither of these monsters are terribly complex, and though their combat design was and still is excellent, they have grown to be a bit easier as newer and younger monsters have come into being, yet there are no incarnations of Nargacuga and Tigrex that I don't adore fighting. To me, Tigrex and Nargacuga are brothers in arms, comrades, two sides of the same phenomenal coin. They are deeply layered, yet fundamentally simple, whereas Volstrax and Glavenus dabbled in the realism and more ecological inclinations of Monster Hunter. Nargacuga and Tigrex wholeheartedly embraced these aspects and illustrated perfectly how magnificent, boundless, creative, and awe-inspiring the nitty-gritty of this world can be. These two combined are one of Monster Hunter's single most inspired choices.